What do other NASCAR drivers think of Bubba Wallace? Bubba Wallace is without a doubt one of the most contentious drivers in NASCAR, and his reputation has taken a hit throughout the 2022 season. Wallace has made numerous blunders throughout his NASCAR career. As a result, only a few drivers, experts, and NASCAR fans like Wallace because he has always found a way to irritate the sport's fanbase with his actions. That is why we will go over some of the public opinions of Wallace, and you will be surprised at what certain drivers and experts said about Bubba as a driver. Hello and thank you for returning to Racing Rush. Today's video will cover what do other NASCAR drivers think of Bubba Wallace. But before we dive into that, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. The range of his controversy is off the charts. We know this because in 2021, in the infamous case of Kyle Rittenhouse, he tweeted a controversial statement. Kyle Rittenhouse would have received life in prison if he had been black, according to the NASCAR driver. Despite the fact that Rittenhouse used his firearm to kill 2 people and injure another during the protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, last summer he was found not guilty of murdering any of the victims. The prosecutor made an attempt to pin the shooting incident on Rittenhouse by claiming he was the victim of an assault by the demonstrators and that he was merely exercising his right to self-defense when he fired his AR-15 rifle at the men. The shooting death of Jacob Blake, a black man, by police officers sparked the demonstrations. Rittenhouse was given a not guilty verdict on all 5 of the charges that were brought against him. Quote, "Ha, let the boy be black and it would have been living hell. He would have had his life taken before the bullshit trial. Sad." End quote, Wallace said in a tweet shortly after the verdict. This tweet from Wallace has received a huge amount of backlash. Wallace, on the other hand, is also one of the most notorious drivers on grid when it comes to his actions on the track. His actions against Kyle Larson have left a blemish on his reputation. Following a crash at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway during the South Point 400, Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson got into a heated argument, with Wallace repeatedly shoving Larson. Larson sent Wallace into the wall as they approached Turn 4 at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Wallace became entangled in Larson's rear fender, crashing both of them as well as fellow driver Christopher Bell. Wallace confronted Larson's car, which had made its way into the infield after the dust had settled. Despite Larson's attempt to flee, Wallace shoved him several times. NASCAR officials were forced to step in and separate the 2 men. Wallace claimed he did not intentionally wreck Larson, but both Larson and Bell saw it as retaliation. NASCAR may penalize Wallace if he believes he retaliated on purpose. When asked what message he was trying to send Larson by shoving him, Wallace replied, "He knows. He knows what he did wrong. He wanted to question what I was doing and he never cleared me," Wallace explained. Kyle Larson's reaction in the situation was truly one of a champion, and if he hadn't been so composed, this whole thing would have blown out of proportion. Larson said that he wasn't shocked when Wallace managed to catch his attention. Larson said sports when asked about Wallace why he did what he did. "I obviously made an aggressive move into 3, got in low, got loose, and chased it up a bit. He got to my right front and it got him tight and into the wall. I knew he was going to retaliate. He had a reason to be mad, but his race wasn't over until he retaliated. It's just what it is. Just aggression turned into frustration and he retaliated." Despite this, he criticized Wallace's behavior, saying, "I don't think it's probably the right thing to do with everything that's been going on here lately with the head injuries. I'm sure with everything going he'll know that he made a mistake in the retaliation part, and I'm sure he'll think twice about that next time." Let's not forget that Wallace is one of the few drivers to have criticized his crew for not properly bolting a tire to his car, and when his crew chief, Booty Baker, apologized to Wallace over the radio for doing so. Wallace's response was, "Leave me the fuck alone, dude." Wallace told Barker, "Don't talk to me the whole fucking race." Now, let us talk about another very vehement critic of Wallace's and his actions, Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty, a former NASCAR Cup Series driver and current NBC sports analyst, were harsh in his assessment of Bubba Wallace Jr. and his actions in Sin City. The 23XI racing driver collided with Hendricks Motorsports' Kyle Larson on the track at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, resulting in retaliation and a physical confrontation between the 2. On a recent episode of the Motormouth show on Peacock, Petty spoke in detail about how the entire scenario that unfolded in Sin City voicing his displeasure with Wallace Jr. in detail. The 62-year-old did not hold back and requested a year-long suspension for Bubba Wallace Jr. in light of his actions during a season in which the next-gen's car safety has been called into question, to put it mildly. He said, "I applaud Bubba and I applaud 23XI for putting social media apology out, but in a world, and I'm cynical, so let's just go ahead and say that, in a world of social media where we post everything, silence sometimes says more than words that are written, and we have heard nothing from Bubba Wallace since the incident happened." Denny Hamlin, co-owner of 23XI Racing and Cup Series owner-operator, spoke about what has been the talk of NASCAR for the past 2 weeks. The Joe Gibbs racing driver went on to say, "I understand why he's mad. I think he understands the bigger picture, and I kind of explained to him, it's tough when you've got a big M on your back and you're walking down the infield. Just a bad look for us." Former NASCAR champion Joey Logano was also harsh in his criticism of Bubba Wallace for causing a collision with Kyle Larson that could have been much worse. He was asked about Wallace's apparent retaliation against Larson by rear-ending him at over 150 miles per hour and knocking both drivers out of the race. The retaliation is not okay in the way that it happened. If he spun him to the infield, maybe it's a little better, maybe. But right rear hooking somebody in the dogleg is not okay. I don't know if everybody realizes how bad that could have been. This could have been the end of Kyle Larson's career. That to me was what was on the line, or his life. That is the worst place to get right rear hooked into a corner. Logano then suggested Wallace use his car as a weapon. If you're that mad, just get out and fight him, that's fine. But do I think straight up blasting them into the wall is okay? No, because the consequences are way bigger than just a race. Wallace isn't always on the receiving end of things. Remember the close race between Kyle Busch and Bubba Wallace in Kansas last year? Both were fighting for P10, and Busch was constantly swearing on the radio while racing with Wallace, saying, "Oh my god, this effing kid," and other offensive things to Wallace. After the race, Busch stated that he was angrier with the team than Wallace, and Busch, a 2-time NASCAR champion, apologized to Wallace for his actions. Wallace has been a very reckless driver in 2022, and while his actions on the track have been very questionable, he has also been involved in some very contentious matters on Twitter, as we mentioned earlier in this video. Wallace has tweeted and played the race card on Kyle Rittenhouse's case, and people were very angry with him for continuing to divide people with tweets like this. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let us know in the comment section below if you believe he is a reckless driver who should face harsher penalties for his actions, or if you believe he is a proper racer who simply races a little harder than everyone else on the grid.